I was trapped in a public pool with a 7-foot alligator circling beneath me. The question came out of nowhere, a jagged rock thrown into the placid water of my afternoon. I was floating on my back in the deep end of the community pool, the glorious Florida sun warming my face, my ears submerged just enough to muffle the happy shrieks of children in the shallow end. It was a perfect lazy Tuesday. I was practicing my dead man's float, a skill I'd been working on all summer, finding a strange peace in the complete surrender to the water's buoyancy. That's when a shadow fell over me. I opened my eyes to see the lifeguard, a young guy named RJ with sun-bleached hair and a perpetual tan, standing at the edge of the pool, his expression unreadable behind his polarized sunglasses. His posture was rigid, not the usual relaxed slouch of a teenager bored on a shift. He was looking past me, his gaze fixed intently on the water around my body. "When do you think you'll drown?" he asked. His voice was low and eerily calm, completely devoid of the usual poolside chatter. The question was so bizarre, so out of place, that I thought I'd misheard him through the water in my ears. I lifted my head, treading water just enough to stay afloat. The sudden movement sent ripples spreading out from my body. "What?" I asked, a nervous laugh catching in my throat. "I can float for a couple of minutes, I guess." "Why?" He took a step closer to the edge, his eyes never leaving the water. He lowered his voice even further, and the calm in it was now undeniably terrifying. It wasn't the calm of boredom, it was the calm of a pilot telling you to brace for impact. "Don't move," he commanded, the words sharp and precise. "And don't leave the water. No matter what you hear, no matter what you see, you need to go back to floating on your back and stay as absolutely still as you can. We need to clear the pool and evacuate everyone else, but you need to stay. Do you understand me?" My mind raced, trying to make sense of the nonsensical instructions. An active shooter? A bomb threat? Why would I be safer in the water? "What's in the water?" My voice came out as a shaky whisper, the fear finally crystallizing in my chest. He didn't answer. His silence was more terrifying than any explanation he could have given. Instead, he raised a silver whistle to his lips and blew 3 short, sharp, deafening blasts that echoed off the concrete and across the shimmering surface of the pool. The sound cut through the joyful noise of the afternoon like a scythe. "Everyone out of the pool." Immediately, he roared, his voice now a booming command that carried to every corner of the facility. "This is not a drill. Evacuate the pool area now." The effect was instantaneous. The placid scene erupted into chaos. Parents who had been lazily sunbathing shot to their feet, their faces masks of confusion and alarm. The shallow end became a churning frenzy of panicked movement as families scrambled for the ladders and stairs. Children, startled by the sudden urgency, began to cry, their wails adding to the cacophony. Water splashed everywhere as parents snatched their toddlers from the water, towels and pool toys forgotten in the desperate rush to exit. The entire shallow end, which had been teeming with life moments before, was empty in less than a minute. A tide of humanity flowed toward the exit gates, grabbing bags and coolers as they ran. I wanted to join them. Every primal instinct in my body screamed at me to kick my legs, to churn my arms, to propel myself toward the safety of the ladder just 15 feet away. But I was trapped, a solitary, vulnerable figure floating in 12 feet of water, paralyzed by the lifeguard's terrifying command. "Hold still." RJ's voice cut through my panic. He hadn't moved from his spot, his eyes locked on the water around me with a laser-like focus. I forced my limbs to relax, to obey. I laid my head back, the water once again filling my ears, and resumed my float. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, each beat sending a tiny, telltale vibration through the water. I was trying my best, but my arms were already beginning to ache from the tension of careful balancing, of fighting the urge to make even the slightest adjustment. The sun beat down, and without the friction of movement, the water suddenly felt colder, more menacing. Not everyone had fled. Some families had stopped at the chain-link fence that enclosed the pool area, their curiosity overriding their fear. They stood in a small, growing crowd, a gallery of spectators to my private horror. A few of them, mostly mothers, called out words of encouragement. "Just relax, honey. Breathe deep. Stay as still as you can." Their voices were a strange, distant comfort. Others, however, had their phones out. I could see the small, dark rectangles held aloft, their little red recording lights pointing at me from multiple angles. I was the star of a show I never auditioned for. Then, 3 other lifeguards appeared, their faces grim and set. They weren't carrying rescue buoys. They were carrying the long-handled nets used for skimming leaves and debris from the surface. They spread out, taking up strategic positions around the perimeter of the deep end, their movements slow, deliberate, and unnervingly quiet. The one nearest to me held his net aloft, poised like a hunter ready to strike. Their collective focus was entirely on the water, their eyes scanning, searching. My breathing hitched, the careful, calm rhythm I was trying to maintain shattering. My lungs felt tight, hungry for air.
It was real now.
Undeniable. There was something in the pool with me. Something dangerous. Something that warranted evacuating dozens of people but required me, for some godforsaken reason, to remain in place, a human buoy marking a deadly spot. The lifeguards crept along the concrete edge, their bare feet silent. They scanned every inch of the water, their gazes sweeping back and forth. The silence was heavy, broken only by the nervous murmurs of the crowd at the fence and the distant sound of traffic. Then, a sudden violent movement. One of the lifeguards, a tall kid positioned near the diving board, plunged his net deep into the water with a grunt of effort. The pole bent under a heavy, unseen weight. He struggled, his muscles straining as something powerful pulled and twisted on the other end, churning the water into a small vortex. "I got one! I got one!" he yelled. The other guards rushed to his side, their own nets momentarily forgotten, leaving me feeling terrifyingly exposed and unwatched for a few long seconds. Together, the three of them heaved, their combined strength barely enough to haul their catch from the depths. As the net broke the surface, my blood turned to ice in my veins. Thrashing within the mesh was an alligator. It wasn't a monster, not a behemoth from a horror movie, but it was big enough. Maybe 4 feet long, a bundle of prehistoric muscle and fury. Its powerful tail whipped back and forth, slapping against the water as the lifeguards struggled to control the writhing pole. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd at the fence, followed by the excited, horrified chatter of people realizing what they were witnessing. More phones came out, a forest of hands rising above the fence line to capture the spectacle. Someone was on the phone, their voice high and panicked, presumably calling animal control. The guards, moving carefully, carried the netted, thrashing gator toward the pool house, its jaws snapping impotently at the air. But RJ, the lifeguard assigned to me, didn't relax. His focus didn't shift to his victorious colleagues. He kept his eyes locked on the water around me, his posture just as tense, his expression just as grim. And in that moment, a new, colder wave of terror washed over me. I understood. If there was one, there might be more. "Can I get out now?" My voice was a pathetic crackle, the sound of a frayed nerve. "Not yet," he said, his voice firm. "Stay still." He subtly shifted his gaze, and I followed it. He pointed to a spot in the deep end, directly opposite from where I was floating. A dark shadow was moving along the bottom of the pool. It wasn't a trick of the light, not a cloud passing overhead. It was a solid, defined shape, moving with a slow, purposeful grace. And it was much, much bigger than the one they had just caught. The other lifeguards saw it too. They abandoned their celebration and quickly repositioned themselves, their faces once again masks of intense concentration. They tried to get an angle with their nets, but the shadow was too deep, too far from the edges, patrolling the painted blue line at the bottom of the pool. "It's circling under her," one of them said, his voice a low, horrified murmur that carried across the unnaturally quiet pool deck. My entire body began to tremble, an uncontrollable shiver that sent a cascade of ripples across the surface, betraying my location, my fear, my life. The shadow continued its lazy, patient patrol of the deep end. Sometimes it would rise closer to the surface, and for a terrifying second, I could make out the unmistakable, prehistoric silhouette, the long, armored body, the powerful tail. Then it would sink again, becoming a dark, indistinct blur against the bright blue of the pool floor. Then, a scream from the crowd. "There's another one!" In the shallow end. Every head swiveled. There, near the steps where children had been playing just minutes ago, was a third, smaller gator. It had been hiding in the shallows the entire time, a silent, scaly predator that had watched the entire evacuation unfold right past its snout. One lifeguard, looking panicked, sprinted over with his net while the other two, including RJ, remained focused on the monster beneath me. A van from animal control screeched to a halt outside the pool gate. 2 officers, a man and a woman, emerged, clad in heavy gloves and protective gear, carrying an array of specialized equipment that looked far more serious than the lifeguards skimming nets. They took charge immediately, one officer taking over the task of netting the small gator in the shallow end while the other, a grizzled, sun-weathered man who introduced himself as Curtis, strode over to RJ to assess the situation in the deep end. "How big is the one under her?" Curtis asked, his voice calm and authoritative. 6 feet, at least. RJ's voice was grim. "Maybe 7. They stood there, discussing options, their voices low and urgent, while I floated helplessly, a human sacrifice tethered above a patient predator. I was a problem to be solved, a variable in a deadly equation. They couldn't net it from the edges. The pool had no quick drain function. A tranquilizer gun was too risky. A startled, drugged alligator was unpredictable and could thrash, could attack. Every potential solution put me in even greater danger. "We need to get her out without triggering its prey drive," Curtis said, his eyes studying the gator's slow, deliberate movement pattern. He formulated a plan. They needed to create a distraction. One officer went back to the van and returned with a plastic bucket containing raw, bloody chicken pieces. The plan was as simple as it was terrifying. Lure the gator to the opposite end of the pool with the bait, and in that window of opportunity, I would swim for my life. But gators were smart, ancient predators. It might not take the bait. It might see my sudden movement as a more enticing target. "When I give the signal," RJ said, positioning himself by the ladder, "my only escape route, you swim straight here. Don't splash. Don't panic. Just smooth, steady strokes. As quiet as you can." My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic prisoner. The officer stood at the far end of the pool and tossed a large piece of chicken into the water. The splash echoed in the tense silence, a sound that made everyone, myself included, hold their breath. The shadow stopped circling. For one long, agonizing moment, it remained perfectly still directly beneath me. I could feel its presence, a cold, heavy weight in the water. Then, slowly, it began to move, gliding through the water toward the bait. "Wait for it," RJ commanded, holding up a hand to stop me. The gator reached the middle of the pool. Still too close. It continued its unhurried approach to the chicken, its movements deceptively lazy. My muscles, locked in their rigid float for what felt like an eternity, were screaming in protest. The crowd at the fence pressed forward, a solid wall of bodies, their phones held high, recording every second of the life-or-death drama unfolding before them. "Now," RJ's voice was a sharp crack in the silence.
"Swim. Now."
My body responded before my mind could process the fear. My arms pushed through the water in the slowest, most deliberate, most agonizingly smooth strokes I could manage. Every instinct, every fiber of my being, screamed at me to thrash, to kick, to explode towards safety. But I forced myself to glide, to be a silent shadow, not a panicked prey animal. The ladder was only 15 feet away, but it felt like miles. Behind me, I could hear the wet, subtle sounds of the gator moving, hopefully toward the chicken, hopefully not toward me. I kept my kick small, controlled, my eyes fixed on the shimmering metal rail of the ladder, my beacon of salvation. My fingers stretched out, straining, and finally, blessedly, they wrapped around the cold, solid steel. I pulled, hard and fast, my body erupting from the water. My right shin scraped raw against the rough concrete edge as I scrambled up, clumsy and desperate. RJ's strong hands grabbed my arm, and he yanked me the rest of the way onto the pool deck, just as the crowd around the fence erupted in a roar of cheers and relieved applause. The second my feet hit the solid ground, my legs turned to jelly. Someone, a kind stranger, threw a big, fluffy beach towel around my shoulders as my knees buckled, and I collapsed onto the hot concrete. My whole body was racked with violent, uncontrollable shivers, my teeth chattering together, even though the Florida sun was beating down with a blistering heat. The world was a blur of motion and sound. Curtis and his partner were now at the pool's edge, the former wielding a long metal pole with a catch loop at the end, the latter holding a thick plastic board like a riot shield. They were advancing on the big gator, which was now nosing at the chicken bait. The pool manager, a portly man with a sweaty brow, rushed over to me, a clipboard clutched in his trembling hands. He kept asking if I was hurt, if I was okay, while simultaneously shoving release forms at me, his face a mask of concern that looked more worried about a lawsuit than my actual well-being. My phone, which someone had thankfully rescued from my spot by the pool, started buzzing incessantly in my bag. I pulled it out with my shaking hand. Notifications flooded the screen. A friend of a friend, a guy named Seth who I barely knew, had already posted a video of the incident. The caption read, "Girl vs. Gator at Community Pool." Insane. It already had dozens of shares. Seeing my own terrified, floating form, filmed and broadcast for public consumption, made a sour, acidic bile rise in my throat. RJ came and sat down on the concrete beside me. He made a weak joke about me not needing swimming lessons after that performance. His simple act of treating me like a person, not a potential plaintiff, helped my breathing begin to slow. A paramedic named Thea Pacheco knelt in front of me, her calm, professional demeanor a welcome anchor in my sea of shock. She checked my pulse, took my blood pressure, and gently suggested a trip to the hospital for shock. I stubbornly refused, but she convinced me to at least have someone stay with me that night. It was then that Curtis walked past, carrying equipment back to his van, and casually mentioned something that turned my shock into a hot, burning rage. He said his department had received 3 separate calls about gator sightings in the retention pond directly behind the pool just this month. 3 calls. 3 warnings. And nobody at the pool had bothered to check the fence, to post a warning sign, to do anything. The pool manager, who overheard the comment, went white as a sheet, the legal implications finally dawning on him. After about 20 minutes, my legs felt steady enough to stand. RJ helped me gather my things and walked me to my car. The parking lot felt surreal, a slice of normalcy after the life-altering terror of the last half hour. I sat in my car for a long time, the engine off, just breathing, before I felt capable of driving the 5 minutes back to my apartment. Inside, I dropped my wet bag and went straight to the shower, needing to wash the feeling of the pool off my skin. But the water couldn't wash away the memory of the shadow, the feeling of being watched by ancient, predatory eyes. I put on my softest pajamas and curled up on my couch, the phone still buzzing with messages I couldn't bring myself to answer. Every creak of the building, every click of the air conditioner, sent a fresh jolt of fear through me. I grabbed my laptop and started typing, pouring out every detail of the experience, the words a jumbled, frantic mess. Writing it down was the only thing that made it feel real, the only thing that stopped my hands from shaking. The next morning, the full weight of the digital aftermath crashed down on me. Seth's video had gone viral overnight, hitting 50,000 views. The comment section was a cesspool of victim blaming and conspiracy theories. I was an idiot for staying in the water. I was an attention-seeking liar who had staged the whole thing. They said the gator was CGI. The vitriol from strangers was a new and unexpected kind of violation. The pool manager called, his voice oozing a false concern, pressuring me to sign a statement declaring the incident a freak accident that no one could have predicted. His pushiness, combined with what Curtis had told me, solidified my resolve. I called the pool office and demanded a copy of the official incident report, only to be given a bureaucratic runaround by 3 different people. Later that day, I drove back to the now-closed pool to retrieve the sandals I'd forgotten. That's when I saw it with my own eyes. A section of the perimeter fence near the bottom had pulled away from its post, leaving a gap more than big enough for an alligator to squeeze through. The latch was rusted, the metal warped with years of neglect. My hands shook as I took photo after photo. That evening, Curtis sent me the proof I needed. Screenshots of the official call logs from his department, showing multiple gator sighting reports near the pool, dating back 2 full months. 2 months of warnings, ignored. The next day, I met with RJ for coffee. He confirmed my worst fears, telling me he had submitted a safety memo about the dilapidated fence weeks ago, only to be told by the manager that repairs weren't in the budget. He was afraid of losing his job, but he wanted me to know the truth. My scattered fear and anger began to coalesce into a cold, hard purpose. I documented everything. The photos of the fence, the screenshots from Curtis, the email receipt RJ forwarded me, even the heart rate data from my smartwatch, which showed a clear, terrifying timeline of the event, with my heart rate spiking from a calm 72 to a frantic 160 beats per minute. The City Recreation Board meeting was on Thursday. I arrived early, armed with a manila folder full of evidence. Curtis testified first, presenting the official reports of the prior sightings and the years of fence deterioration. Then RJ, his voice trembling but firm, testified about his ignored safety memo. Then it was my turn. I walked to the podium, my legs unsteady, but my voice was clear as I laid out the facts, one by one. I showed them my heart rate data, the photos, the call logs. The board members leaned forward, their expressions shifting from bureaucratic boredom to genuine alarm. After 3 more residents testified about their own unreported gator sightings, the board announced their decision. The pool would remain closed pending an independent review of all safety protocols and management decisions. They ordered immediate, comprehensive fence repairs and the installation of professional wildlife barriers. The pool manager slumped in his chair, defeated. After the meeting, he tried to corner me, pulling a non-disclosure agreement from his briefcase, talking about compensation and closure. My lifelong fear of authority figures finally evaporated, replaced by a steely resolve. I looked him dead in the eye, said no, and walked out into the cool night air, a free woman. The nightmares continued, but I started therapy with a counselor named Jada, who taught me grounding techniques that pulled me back from the edge of panic. The city's investigation confirmed everything we had presented. The manager was placed on probation. The pool reopened 2 weeks later, a fortress of safety with a new 8-foot fence, self-latching gates, and wildlife warning signs every 20 feet. RJ was promoted to provisional pool supervisor. Slowly, painstakingly, I began to reclaim the water. Jada came with me to a small, indoor rec center pool. I managed 3 short, heart-pounding laps, but it was a start. Weeks later, I returned to the community pool. Seeing the concrete safety changes, the new supervisor diligently making his rounds, felt like a cautious exhale. I slipped into the shallow end and swam, my strokes slow and deliberate, my eyes open, scanning for shadows that were no longer there. I started speaking out, turning my trauma into advocacy. I worked with Curtis on a community wildlife education event, teaching families about coexisting safely with Florida's predators. The city council, spurred by the public outcry, approved permanent budget increases for safety upgrades at all public recreation facilities. A full year after the incident, I am a regular at the morning swim. The pool that was once the site of my greatest terror is now a model of community safety, a testament to the fact that one person's voice, armed with the truth, can be more powerful than the silence of institutional neglect. The fear isn't gone, not completely. It's a part of me now, a scar that reminds me to be aware, to be vigilant. But it no longer controls me. I swim in the deep end now, my strokes strong and confident, the water once again a place of peace, a peace I fought for and won.